Hello and welcome to another lecture for History of Journalism. I'm Professor Harper, and today here's some brief background about Hunter Thompson. You probably heard of Thompson before. He was born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1937. He attended public schools and joined the Air Force and started to get into trouble at the beginning. He became a sports reporter and received a dishonorable discharge for disregard for military dress and authority in 1958. After being fired from jobs, note dishonorably discharged and fired, from a small newspaper in New York and Time magazine, Thompson went to Puerto Rico and wrote briefly for a bowling magazine. In 1961, he left for South America and wrote lengthy stories for the Dow Jones-owned weekly, The National Observer. The National Observer doesn't exist anymore, but it was a wonderful newspaper. I subscribed to it when I was young, and it had a great influence on me in terms of my writing. In 1963, he returned again to the United States and continued writing for The Observer, but he quit the publication in 1964 when he was not allowed to cover the free speech movement in Berkeley, California at the University of California. He settled in San Francisco and he worked as a freelance writer. And in 1965, he wrote a story for The Nation magazine on the Hells Angels motorcycle gang, and that drew attention from numerous publishers. He wrote a book, The Strange and Terrible Saga of the Outlaw Motorcycle Gangs. He said to one interview, "I've got a lot in common with the Hells Angels. The main difference is that I've got a gimmick. I can write." In the late 1960s, he wrote for Ramparts and Scanlon's, two magazines that embraced his role in the counterculture, and one in Scanlon's in 1970 on the Kentucky Derby started what he called gonzo journalism. And gonzo basically was Hunter Thompson's way of filing stuff in a flamboyant way, is that he'd rip it off of the typewriter and put it into a fax machine and go gonzo. It essentially started when Thompson, who was drunk a lot or stoned a lot, submitted only disorganized notes which focused more on himself than on the Derby race. He published, the whole thing was published intact and widely acclaimed, and Thompson's desperate deadline impulse gave birth to gonzo journalism. He joined Rolling Stone magazine, and in 1971 he wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which was a story about a motorcycle race and a national drug law enforcement convention in Las Vegas. It became heralded as part of new journalism. He was a crazed persona. He wore Hawaiian shirts, had a cigarette holder, mirrored sunglasses, and he became the basis for Gary Trudeau's character Raoul Duke in the comic strip Doonesbury. He covered the presidential campaign for Rolling Stone in 1972, and his articles were published as Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail. It doesn't stand up as well as I thought it might when I reread it a couple of years ago. His colleague Timothy Krause's book, Boys on the Bus, actually holds up a lot better. But Thompson is known for his complete mockery of traditional reporting techniques. No objectivity, no balance, no fairness. He essentially was the star of his writing. A lot of first-person stuff, and a lot of reporters really envied the freedom that Thompson had with Rolling Stone. At his peak, Thompson was seen as one of the original prose writers of the 1970s. He became a cult figure, and he continued to write, after the 1970s, but not with the same energy, flamboyance that he had before then. And he became embittered and depressed, and he committed suicide in 2005 in Aspen, Colorado, where he was living. Hunter Thompson, an interesting writer. We'll take a look at one of his pieces about Richard Nixon's resignation. It's not one of his best, but it's an interesting slice of Hunter Thompson. And that's what we have for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you online.